Wow. I don't know where we start. Somebody in the audience said, I guess there's a part two, perhaps another attempt.
Yeah.
You have taken this film to the White House. You've taken it around the country. You've inspired university students, school students, people who are not climbers, who are not athletic, way beyond the athletic realm and the physical. So talk a little bit about how people have responded and received this, and whether or not the message, the goal of what you wanted to do has been achieved.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say, this is the third time I've seen this. I don't like to watch stuff that, I don't like hearing my own voice. I don't like myself on hearing like recordings or whatever. So I'm really glad to be here after seeing that. It's pretty, you know what I mean? Like,
you're lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, really, seriously. But this was really just about, I think everyone had their own motivations, but for me, it was really an extension of my upbringing. My parents always told me, you can do anything you want to do. And I kind of didn't believe them, like anything, really? And so it was an attempt to prove that to myself for my daughters. And I think each of the 9 climbers had a motivation that was broadly similar to that. But I think the thing that was common among all of us was that we wanted that message to extend beyond just our immediate circle. We wanted to push it out as far as we could, and really just to say to humanity, if we could reach out that far, like, we believe in you, we love you, and we believe you can do anything, like really anything. Trust us. And so one of the things that didn't come through in the film is that while we were on our summit day, across the United States, there was a ground game going that we called 10,000 Steps to Denali. And in communities across the country, folks, some of whom were climbers, others were, had never done anything athletic in their lives, took basically the same 10,000 steps or 5 miles or so that we were taking to get to the summit. And so we're really proud of that work. And there were a bunch of, from the First Ladies group and a bunch of community organizations and churches, across the country. We got a bunch of people out and engaged, so we're really happy about that.
That's amazing. That's great. And tell us about, you talk about your daughters, you talk about your wife, how important that was. It's pretty clear that that's what got you through. What were some of the things that the other climbers were really counting on? And was faith a part of it, or how did they endure some of the greatest disappointments in those turns when we saw them physically struggling, but I imagine too, emotionally as well?
I mean, I was talking with one of my closest friends today and just saying, one of the most important lessons for me coming out of this was the understanding that engaging in an endeavor as a group creates a level of strength that's just unimaginable for any individual. And so I think it was the commitment to the group that kept everyone going. Every single climber there had at least one day where they completely broke down. I mean, like physically and or emotionally, or for whatever reason, couldn't carry a bag or couldn't melt water or couldn't even drink, just could not function. And it was really the love of the group that kept those folks going. And that's something that developed over the course of, about a year and a half of training together. And everyone had, a common commitment to what we were trying to accomplish as a whole. And so I think that's probably the thing that kept us going.
Do you have a story? Do you have a backstory of a moment, perhaps? Because we saw a lot of the 19-year-old, and we saw the older gentlemen and the women, and it seemed like everybody got along. But can you take us a little bit behind the scenes of somebody
Sure.
who might have had a difficult day and how they got through that with the help of someone else?
Well, I'll confess my own. I won't put anyone else out there, but we didn't get along. It's hard. It's hard to live under extreme duress for 3 weeks, living under a piece of fabric that's, 6 feet by 8 feet with 3 people living in it. There's a lot of tension. That didn't come out in the film, but it's part of what has to be managed. It's part of that group dynamic that I was talking about. So, and I had actually forgotten this till I saw the film just now, but on the segment where they were talking about the Windy Corner, where we had to go up and we thought we were going to go dig a cache at Windy Corner, but we didn't make it. And that Windy Corner is actually one of the most dangerous parts of the mountain. You can literally just get blown off the mountain. We went up, didn't make it, had to go back down and go for a second day carrying a bunch of heavy stuff. And one of the hardest things to manage at elevation is hydration. You get dehydrated, and when you get dehydrated, you actually stop wanting to drink water. So it's just this downward spiral. And we had a little bit of conflict because on the way up, I was getting a little dehydrated, and one of my teammates confronted me about that. So I drank more water, and the next day we tried to make the move to the 14,000-foot camp. And like I said, everyone had their day. Well, that was my day, and we were carrying sleds, and I don't know if you could tell from the film, but basically the slope was pretty steep off to the side. And so as you're trying to take a step forward, the sled was dangling off to the right and kind of pulling you in a very awkward way, twisting. And so for hours, I was literally just arm wrestling with this sled for every step that I took. And that's fine. Climbing's hard. You got that out. But what really got hard was a function of something that people don't talk about that's really impacting the sport of mountaineering, and that's climate change. You saw those rocks fall at Windy Corner. Well, this is one of the most dangerous aspects of climbing Denali and many other mountains now, because the sun is melting out a lot of rocks that have been cemented in ice for decades. And so on this particular day, because it was a long journey to the 14,000-foot camp, we were passing in the afternoon when the rocks were falling. And I felt like I was at my physical limit, and literally was, you try to, in your mind, I think, measure, distances and give yourself, maybe 5 minutes, and then I'll just mentally kind of reset. And that, for me, it went 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3, like if I can just make it 30 seconds, I just started pacing myself in these smaller and smaller increments till literally I was praying just for another step, just one more step. I felt like I just don't have, and I've been an athlete. I've been an athlete all my life, and so I know what it's like to hurt. But that's the hardest physical moment I've experienced. And in that moment, the rocks started falling. And a big boulder fell between me and one of my teammates on my rope team.
That was what we saw in the film?
That's not what you saw in the film. So the funny thing is that the gnarliest stuff that happened on that mountain you didn't see because we're too busy trying to survive. No one had a camera out, right? So this rock fell between my teammate and me, and they said, "Run." Like, okay, run. Yeah, right. Like, I'm praying for another step. Are you kidding? Completely dehydrated, just depleted. It was just I had nothing. But I think that goes back to the point about the power of the group. I love those people so much, and I knew they were relying on me, and you're literally connected with a rope. And so if I didn't run, I couldn't get my teammates out of there, and so somehow I found another gear and was able to, get out of there safely. But I think everyone has some kind of story like that, and that's what that mountain's about, I think.
And there were people who were 19 years old all the way to 57. You had people who had never done anything like that to people who were close to being professional. How did they learn from each other? What did they take from each other? Was there something that was surprising that they could actually give and respect each other's skills, even though they were so completely different?
Yeah, I have to really credit the National Outdoor Leadership School, which helped organize this trip, Knowles. Their entire program around mountaineering is organized around a principle that they call expedition behavior. And I think it's a really fabulous concept that I hope we'll talk about at some point here in Aspen. It's basically the notion that being a good teammate allows a team to operate at a level that it certainly couldn't otherwise. And this sounds really basic and obvious, but expedition behavior, in this context, translates to really simple things like learning to keep a tidy space, learning to put sharp metal equipment away, disciplined things like that, because if you don't do those kinds of things and form those sorts of good habits, really, you saw Tyree lost his sled and went and dove after it and dislocated his shoulder, and that could have put the whole team at risk. I mean, people can die because of those sorts of things. So we actually spent, on 2 separate occasions, 2 weeks on glaciers with the Knowles team, where they flew the team out there, dropped us on the glacier, and said, we'll be back in 2 weeks. And we had to, with instructors, but we had to learn to survive with each other. And through that process, all of this conflict that I talked about, we had to learn to resolve it. All of the technical skills about, crevasse rescue, for example. On our first training, we learned, if someone falls there are these crevasses or these deep ice valleys. If someone falls into them, how do you get them out? And the day after we had that class, one of the folks on my rope team actually fell into a crevasse. And so it was hours after we learned the skill, we actually had to put it into action.
I want to open up the conversation to the audience because I know you all have a lot of questions. And one of the themes of the Action Forum, too, when you talk about collaborative leadership, you and I had a chance to talk about it before, and you said the teams that succeed in getting higher and higher are the ones that can collaborate and talk to each other and communicate. It's not necessarily the bigger ones or the ones that have the best equipment. So I want to kind of open up the discussion and see if you guys have some questions about like taking it beyond the mountain. Go ahead.
I'm curious to know, in your training, did you start with more people and they dropped out, or yes?
Yeah, it's a good question. We started out with about 25 people on the team, and we went through this series of training for about maybe a year and a half or so, and that group of 25 was narrowed down to 9 climbers, but everyone was on the team. There was a support team, and there were folks doing everything from sending in weather reports to organizing that 10,000 Steps campaign back here in the continental U.S., just to being a communications relay to families and friends. So it was definitely a group effort, even though there were only 9 climbers ultimately.
This one on this side.
I'm so proud of you. So great. Such a great film. And I'm just wondering, since it's come out, have there been additional exhibitions that are planned? Like, I'm sure this has been inspiring so many. And how can we help you get this film out further as fellows?
It's a great question. I'm a little ashamed to even show this film with Tiffany Schlein here, who's just an amazing filmmaker and friend. Yeah, I mean, I think there have probably been, I don't know that there's been anything on this scale. We hope there will be, but there have been several smaller expeditions. But what we're really trying to do is just get this story out. This film has actually not been publicly released. There have been screenings like this, private screenings. But we're in the process of negotiating with PBS and Netflix and others to try to get distribution. And we're not really trying to make money here. What we're trying to do is get the most eyeballs on this. And you know, the narrative here is about black climbers on Denali, but it turns out there really isn't a great film about Denali at all. So we think everyone should see this. And so in the spirit of collaboration, you know, Reed, you know, Hastings from Netflix is one of our fellows, folks who know Reed. If you think this is all right, I think, you know, shoot him an email and say, hey, dude, like you should put this on your platform and help some kids see this, you know, get the word out.
Yes, this side.
Thank you.
Got a couple in the middle there.
Congratulations to you and your team. I wanted to ask you, what kind of food did you bring with you besides this rice and the beans and whatever else? Did you bring any meat or dried, of course, or what did you bring and how much did you have to carry besides your sleeping gear and all the other gear?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, so you can basically take what you want, you just have to carry it. So, you know, everyone takes underwear, a mid-layer, and a puffy layer of clothing, boots, crampons, the spikes, and an axe. There's group gear, tents, pickets, you know, that kind of stuff. And then after that, you know, yeah, we had a little bit of meat. There's a lot of fat, butter, and cheese and things like that. You can trade up there. Our first day, we had moose meat because someone had some, and we traded. You know, there's sort of a barter economy going up there. Protein is in high demand, especially as you get up higher, and it's hard to get it in. But yeah, I mean, we packed probably about 100, a little more than 100 pounds of gear, food, and fuel per climber. And that's why we were, you know, dragging those sleds like mules up the mountain.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just curious about you when at the very beginning of the film, some of the climbers said when they told their friends that they were going out that they were just like, we don't climb or we don't surf, we don't swim. And I'm curious, once you guys were on the mountain or interacting with other climbers, were they surprised to see you guys there as well, or was it kind of just like, we're so happy that you're here and what, like, thank you, or maybe not?
Yeah, no. I get what you're asking. I mean, I'd say the good news is on the mountain, all that stuff melts away. It's a beautiful, beautiful. You know what? I know. I have another story I want to tell. At that 14,000-foot camp, remember that they said that the sun doesn't go down up there. And we got to 14,000 feet, and it turned out the next day, our rest day, happened to be the summer solstice. So the sun was high in the sky as you looked out over here. And if you looked out over here, on that 2 years ago, the summer solstice and the full moon were on the same night. And so if you look over here, the sun is beaming. If you look over there, the moon is in fullness. And underneath that kind of beauty, these petty issues of race and the stuff we deal with down here in the front country melt away. And for me, that was the most important moment, you know? It's why we climb.
It's beautiful. Go ahead. Some folks on this side.
Stephen, spectacular. Just so spectacular. Thank you. I wonder how this experience has changed you since you've come home. I know it was long in the making, but how are you a different leader, father, investor as a result of it?
It's a good question. I think I'm still learning the answer to it. I think one thing I would say is, maybe this sounds a little weird, I don't know, but I feel wild. I do. I feel much more in tune with the earth. I have an instinct to climb or be outside. I do believe we can do anything collectively, literally. Got a lot of energy. I hadn't seen this film much, and so I was surprised by this. I think my reaction initially when I saw it was, oh, that's rad, I want to do that. And then I realized, like, oh, I did that. And so I'm just excited about our endeavors collectively, what we're going to do. I think we're so capable. And I guess to answer the question, I believe in that more now than I did then. I'm more certain about how amazing we are.
We have time for one or two more questions. You guys want to?
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
So what's next? And how are you funded?
Not funded. For this, the way climbing works, you usually kind of put a campaign together, and on this one we were fortunate to be sponsored by Knowles and North Face and REI, great organizations that helped make this happen. I'm part of a climbing team that's attempting to complete the 7 summits, the highest peak on each continent. And so we would go, sort of expedition by expedition and pull together sponsors. Everest is out there. I'm really thinking through that. I lost a friend on Everest a few months ago. And I have a family, I've got kids. The hardest part of this climb for me was getting out of the house and making things right at home. And so when I got home, I stopped climbing just to be dedicated at home. But it's been a while, and I'm having that sort of wild thing happen again. I feel like it's time to climb again, so we'll see where it goes.
Is your wife in the audience?
She doesn't know, so let's just keep that between us for now.
Just between us. All right, we got time for, I'm telling us one more. So you choose.
Thank you. I have a double question. One, who did the filming, with the technical part of it? And then the second part of the one gentleman, the 56-year-old, was the one that talked about going back to the community and sharing. So with this, the mission was to show African American children, or people, folks, that this can be done. Have you as a group figured out how to take that to the next step?
Yeah, great questions both. I'm glad you asked about the filming. I think the folks with the cameras in their hands are the unsung heroes of this film and films like this. Those guys had to, we'd get up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Those guys were up at midnight if we were up at 2, that kind of thing. They had to climb before us. They had to get set into position, get anchored, and take the shots. So those guys are amazing. And there was a media team with us that was doing all the technical stuff we were doing, plus humping a bunch of heavy gear and getting into position. So those guys are just amazing. I'm sorry, your other question was about
the message to African American community.
So we've been out speaking in schools. I have a big expedition bag that I take to schools and unzip, and I'll show them the tents and the crampons and the ice axes, and just let people, kids physically touch this stuff and say, "Oh, you'll cut yourself like that," and they get so engaged. This is so cool. No one's ever shown me something like that. And where is Alaska? All these things, and it's not just black kids; it's kids. This is the point. This is our country. And we're trying to show people how beautiful it is, how majestic it is, and how vast it is, and in that context, how small we are to the questions. Some of the issues we're dealing with here are tiny and solvable. So we're doing that. We've been speaking throughout the network of REI stores, North Face stores, churches, schools. It goes on and on. But there's a limit to the number of physical gatherings we can have, which is why it's so important that we get this film out there. So again, if you want to send an email to Reed, I'm just saying, you might want to. Yeah.
All right, we'll send an email to Reed. We got it. We just want to thank Stephen so much for sharing his film. We wish you the very best, and
Thank you very
I mean, you
much.
show us that this is something that we can extend in our own lives beyond the mountains. So,
Thank
again,
you all
to get
for
to the
allowing me to
mountaintop.
share it.
Thank you very much.